Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right there from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions of the product. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome. And of course, we would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, and review, and share the podcast with your friends. Joining me today, we have Logan Wilkinson back. How you doing, Logan?
Always a pleasure to do a double-header podcast session with you here, Trev.
Yeah, we have a busy week of podcasts ahead. We just wrapped this week's That News You Care About, which was very politically heated and a great conversation there.
Yep.
And now we are going to be diving into, for that Disney Plus or that D Plus show, we're diving into Halloweentown. So tell me, Logan, your history and why you wanted to do Halloweentown. This is going to be basically the last of our Halloween-themed episodes this year. After Hocus Pocus a couple weeks ago with you, and then I did Frankenweenie as a solo show last week. So tell me about Halloweentown and why this one was on your list of like, let's tackle this.
Yeah, I mean, I think Halloweentown, in a similar vein as Hocus Pocus, is kind of a classic like family Halloween movie. I grew up and it's weird too because I mentioned this I think when we were recording a different one of our podcasts yesterday, but there seems to be like some sort of strange like disconnect of like people either really love Hocus Pocus, people either really love Halloweentown. My family always grew up watching both, so I have really fond and really strong memories of both Halloweentown and Hocus Pocus. And get into watching it again, I was reminded of just how much of a like awesome nostalgic blast these two movies are. And Halloweentown, in particular, is just so dripping with the nostalgia. And yeah, so I've had a soft spot for it. Whenever I would I think come up with a list of like what I think are like the 3 or 4 best Disney Channel original movies of all time, Halloweentown is always on that list. So it felt like an obvious movie to kind of give a shout out to in this season.
All right. Yeah, sounds good. It's funny because I've talked on the show before, and I think in our Hocus Pocus episode we talked a little bit about the idea of like I don't think I'd seen Halloweentown, and having watched it now, I was like, oh no, I've definitely seen this, but I definitely don't have like the like permanence. It's not burned in my brain like it seemed to have been with you. Like as soon as the movie kind of starts and we start hitting into a couple of the things, I'm like, oh, okay, I remember these plot points. I know where this movie's going. Okay, so I've definitely seen it, but yeah, I just didn't have like the deep-seated love for it or history with it, and part of that probably comes down to just when it came out versus where I was at my life, compared to like Hocus Pocus, which also funny. Since my mom has since listened to the Hocus Pocus episode, and we talked a little bit last week, she and I, about the fact that she didn't remember Hocus Pocus at all being like a staple of my childhood or mine and my sister's childhood. She doesn't remember having ever seen it or anything like that. And I was like, well, yeah, but also like think about where you would have been in your life versus where we were at in our life, where watching those kinds of things over and over again was just kind of like commonplace for an 8-year-old or a 6-year-old in my sister's case, I think, at the time, whereas this came out a little bit later, kind of as I was in this came out basically when I was in middle school. So if I didn't catch it that first year round and looked towards it when it would come out every Halloween on Disney Channel, it was, I was in high school at that time, and, what else was I doing with, high school friends and stuff? So maybe it just didn't make its way into really cementing itself in my brain as a result of that, compared to you, who would have been much younger when this one came out, certainly. And so it would have definitely made much more of an indelible impression, I'm sure. So yeah, let's dive into a little bit of the history of Halloweentown here. As I kind of alluded to, originally released October 17th, 1998. So this is 5 years there after Hocus Pocus had come out, I believe, because I believe that was the 93 movie when we talked about that a couple weeks ago. Other notable releases I pulled in here at the time. This was about a month after the world gave us Rush Hour with Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. October 1st gave us A Night at the Roxbury. October 2nd gave us Ants, the Woody Allen-led bug movie that year. A Bug's Life wouldn't come out for another month. It came out like late October, but that was another one of those like years where, hey, you've got two of the same kind of movie hitting at the same time of things. On the made-for-TV front side of things, we had Sabrina Goes to Rome, featuring the cast of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, came to, I imagine, TGI Friday on October 4th. The day before this came out, October 16th, gave us Bride of Chucky. We also got Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in animated form on October 16th, which we'll tie back in later because one of our actors from this film also was in Rudolph. You had Life is Beautiful, came out October 22nd, which is a movie I haven't thought about in many, many years. And the thing most people would think about with Life is Beautiful is Roberto Benigni, its lead star at the Oscars, like walking along the seats to go up and accept his award. Like I imagine people remember that far more than they remember anything of the actual film. October 30th also gave us American History X. And then the last one I pulled in here, just because I was amazed it didn't really go for the October push, was I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, that came out 2 weeks after Halloween on November 13th. So bold strategy for that sequel that year. Halloweentown here comes in at a brisk hour and 24 minutes.
It is brisk, too.
Yeah. And in the Disney Channel original movie timeline, this was one of the very first ones in the Disney Channel original movie banner, coming after Brink, which had come out August 29th of 1998. And you can see a whole dedicated episode to our thoughts on Brink on that D Plus show that we recorded back at PAX East when we were all together in the before times. And then this would be followed in January of 1999 by Xenon, Girl of the 21st Century. So that was another thing that, like, when I saw that in the timeline of things, I was like, oh, I probably had to have seen this because I have very vivid memories of Brink and I have very vivid memories of Xenon. So I'm sure I've probably seen Halloweentown here. But again, because it was so focused on Halloween, it probably wasn't getting as much replay value as the more timeless Brink and Xenon got. And Halloweentown probably just kind of came and went every October. And all of this kind of came in that period before Disney Channel original movies were happening like once a month. These were the like every few months, they were getting a lot more kind of production value behind them in the lead up of that. As far as the who's who of the film, diving into the roll call, our director here is Dwayne Dunham, who immediately caught my eye because he had been an editor or an associate editor on Empire Strikes Back and then a full-fledged editor on Return of the Jedi. He directed Homeward Bound: The Incredible Journey, which was one of those movies that I absolutely watched a ton growing up, as well as Little Giants. And then following this movie, he would go on to direct a handful of other Disney Channel original movies, none of which ring any bells to me. But
I know like all of these, yeah.
Yeah. They include The 13th Year, Ready to Run, Double Teamed, Right on Track, Tiger Cruise. Oh, I have it in here twice, I guess. And Tiger Cruise. I don't know why I have Ready to Run on here twice, but and then he also directed a couple episodes of Star Wars: The Clone Wars animated series. The writers, we had 3 writers on this film. You have Paul Birnbaum, who did the story and teleplay of the film, who was primarily a TV writer prior to this, having written a few episodes for the A-Team and 21 Jump Street shows. And then later he would go on and write the script for Hollywoodland, which is that indie film a number of years back where it's notable to me, at least, in that Ben Affleck played George Reeves, a.k.a. like the original Superman actor, even before Christopher Reeves. That caught my eye and caught my attention. And then a pair of writers, John Cooksey and Ali Marie Matheson, seemed to be kind of a team of writers that had worked on a handful of episodes of Rugrats, and then they would go on and also write the script for Halloweentown 2, and they would also go on to create a Canadian sci-fi show called The Collector that ran for a season or two per IMDb. Starring... we have Debbie Reynolds in here in the
legend.
arguably lead role there of Aggie, or certainly like lead support role. Yeah, legendary performer, best known probably for Singing in the Rain, and the Unsinkable Molly Brown, where she played the titular character on that one. She also had her own variety show, The Debbie Reynolds Show. I didn't catch this, or I didn't realize this, but looking through IMDb, she is the voice of Charlotte in Charlotte's Web, which is another one of those movies that I associate so deeply with my childhood that I just thought it was a movie of my childhood, and didn't realize until like a year or two ago when I saw somebody like post an article about this, that like that's a movie from the 70s that just kind of like blew up in the early 90s because it got re-released on VHS. And that's certainly how I got introduced to it, and just it became a staple of my childhood. And I didn't realize that Debbie Reynolds was the voice there of Charlotte. And then she is the person in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer that I referenced earlier, playing, I believe, Mrs. Claus, as well as a couple other roles in that little animated version of Rudolph. You have Kimberly J. Brown here as Marnie, who also would go on to be in the films Tumbleweeds, and then she would come back for Halloweentown 2 and Halloweentown High. And then she's also in a couple other movies, Bringing Down the House and Be Cool.
Also in, I think it's Quintuplets or Quints, where she's the older sister and her mom has 5 kids. It's also a Disney Channel original movie. It is a classic.
All right, that does sound familiar. I just didn't recognize it, so I did not pull it in here. Judith Hogue, a.k.a. Gwen, a.k.a. the mom. I did not realize that she was the original April O'Neil in the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, but she was not brought back for Secret of the Ooze, which is probably why like she doesn't. Because I just remember watching Secret of the Ooze so much more, probably because of the Vanilla Ice rap. Admittedly,
almost certainly.
So yeah, when I saw her pop up in this, I did not at all piece together that she was April O'Neil. She also was in the film Armageddon, and then she came back to all of the Halloweentown films: Halloweentown 2, Calabar's Revenge, Halloweentown High, Return to Halloweentown, and then she was also in the TV show Nashville. She had a recurring role in that for a number of years. Joey Zimmerman, playing Dylan, aka the younger brother, is one of the other few actors in this that came back for all of the Halloweentown films. Philip Van Dyke, playing Luke here, was, prior to this, was young Johnny Storm in the notably terrible 1994 Fantastic Four film that was done just to kind of keep rights of the franchise, and it's one of those things that is constantly lampooned in kind of the what would be the Mystery Science Theater kind of circles of the internet. So he was young Johnny Storm in that, and then. This caught my eye because I was like, he was Arnold in Hey Arnold. He is one of 5 actors to have played Arnold in the TV show Hey Arnold. Apparently, they cycled through a lot of young kids on that show that I definitely would not have ever realized or recognized when I was watching it growing up. He came back for Halloweentown 2, and then he really hasn't done anything since a little bit of TV work back in 2003. He seems to have stepped away from kind of the industry as a whole. Then lastly, we have, or no, not lastly, lastly in the family, we have Emily Reski, playing the little girl Sophie there, who prior to this had done one of the Three Ninjas movies, Three Ninjas High Noon at Mega Mountain, which is not a Three Ninjas movie or a Three Ninjas subtitle I remember, though I do remember seeing like the original Three Ninjas in the drive-in movie theater here in town. That is no longer actually here. It got torn down a few years back. But then she would come back for Halloweentown 2 and Halloweentown High. And then lastly, we have Robin Thomas here as Calabar, who would, of course, come back in Calabar's Revenge, Halloweentown 2. And he's a character actor that like has one of those faces, been in 100 other things out there on TV, usually pops up for, an episode here or there of stuff.
Great bad guy.
Yeah, great bad guy in this. And that was, and yeah, that was like, as soon as he popped up in this, I was like, oh, that's right, he's going to end up being the bad guy. But like, he plays the charming good guy, like just like deliciously well. I think he has a ton of fun with that, and the not hearing Sophie's name over and over again was a fun little bit there. A little bit of trivia for the film. St. Helens, Oregon is where the original Halloweentown was filmed, and they welcome tourists. In fact, they have a month-long Spirit of Halloweentown event to celebrate the October holiday and allow fans of the movie to explore the town. They even try and recreate parts of the set, like the giant jack-o'-lantern in the town square. I have no idea if they're doing that this year. I imagine they're probably doing something still for their community, but obviously COVID world kind of throwing things for a loop. According to Kimberly J. Brown, aka Marnie, the flaming hairdryer that Marnie accidentally picks up was actually real with real flames, and there was no special effects involved, again, according to the actress there. Despite there being 4 Disney Channel original movies in the Halloweentown series, many actors only appeared in a couple of them. Only Debbie Reynolds, who played Agatha, Judith Hogue, who played Gwen, and Joey Zimmerman, who played Dylan, came back and are credited as appearing in all 4 Halloweentown titles. Marnie, Dylan, and Sophie were named after writer Paul Birnbaum's children. And the last little one I have pulled in here, Debbie Reynolds descends from the bus carrying her from descends from the Halloweentown bus by floating down to the sidewalk with an umbrella, not unlike Mary Poppins. Reynolds was considered for the role before Julie Andrews was cast. Obviously, that was like just a very overt nod to Mary Poppins there to kick this film off. So, yeah, how does it hold up? What did you think going back and revisiting this there, Logan?
Yeah, it's interesting, especially doing this in kind of conjunction with also the Hocus Pocus episode we did. It's still a ton of fun for me, right? Like, I think the big thing I'll say that I'm sure you'll jump in and agree to as well is it is clear. I want to like crouch this in as many things as possible. It is clear to me that one of these movies was a film that was released in motion picture theaters and one wasn't. And I think that's not like a slant against Halloweentown at all. Like, Halloweentown's a ton of fun. Like, I think if you watch Halloweentown and are totally ready to just have a good time, you're going to have such a fun time with the movie. Like, obviously, like, special effects wise, one got more attention than the other. And I don't even think the special effects are like particularly bad in this movie, with the one exception of like them on the broom scene was pretty rough. I won't deny that, but otherwise I thought it was actually pretty good. They had some funny gags. I think the chicken in particular, like in the beginning of the movie, was a nice little like gag to kind of pop in. But no, it's a ton of fun still, I think, right? Like, I think this is one of the most like nostalgic infused Disney Channel original movies for me, and I think watching it yet again, I'm like, this movie's still great. It was funny, and I talked about this a little bit with you yesterday, how certain things, like the order of certain things, are mixed up, right? So the scene of Marnie, Dylan, and Sophie getting the various ingredients for the potion, I thought happened much earlier in the movie. I thought it was like one of the first things they did, and it's in a lot of ways like kind of the last thing they do before the big fight. But like that scene in particular has like always, it's like blazed in my mind. Like, that is such a like, because that is one of the scenes to me like most showcases is just how cool Halloweentown is, where you get like kind of a full glimpse of like all of the creatures and all the monsters in Halloweentown, and they each kind of get like a moment, like the Wolfman, a ghost, a vampire, and it's such a cool, I think, look at like why Halloweentown is such a rad place. It's a ton of fun still, I think. It's really good. Kimberly J. Brown is great as Marnie. And Debbie Reynolds is Debbie Reynolds. And so, like you said, Calabar, that actor he just chews up his scenes. He is so deliciously charming when he's trying to like lather it on early in the movie, and it's great. I love it. The like skeleton taxi driver is great. Like, there's a lot Benny. To like. Yeah, there's a lot to like in this movie, and I think 98 was 22 years ago now. And like, I think, like I said for Hocus Pocus, I am still happy with how good this movie is 22 years later.
Yeah, I think especially so going back to your kind of initial point there of like this clearly doesn't have the budget that like a Hocus Pocus had. I would argue though that it's still, again, as a result of being one of those very early Disney Channel movies, original movies, that where they were putting in a lot of more resources to it before they started churning out Disney Channel original movies every month. Like this definitely has more value to it, more budget behind it than like Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off did, or a couple of the other kind of like Halloween themed ones that we've done episodes on, of Phantom of the Megaplex or Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire. Like this has much more heft behind it than either of those do, certainly. So it kind of is that like weird hybrid of, yes, this is clearly the made-for-TV movie of these two, but it's a higher quality and higher caliber made-for-TV movie than some of the other ones we've seen as we've kind of explored a lot of Disney Channel original movies on that D Plus show over the last year that we've been doing the show. And so yeah, like there were definitely still elements that like it resonates more so in the acting than anything for me, and the kind of like that this is like that, made for kids kind of TV energy movie. Because like I think like Marnie, Dylan, and Sophie are all doing their roles, but they're also very like tropey kind of roles in their specific areas. Like Dylan always being like the know-it-all kind of like kid. I feel like that kid, that actor Joey Zimmerman, I feel like he probably had done that in a handful of other things that I just didn't pull in here because they were like one-off TV episodes and stuff like that. But he definitely like was that kid for that time, in that little brief window in 1998, 99 or something like that. He was that know-it-all, nerdy kid, and he's playing that role to kind of like his strengths there. Marnie is kind of being the like thinks she's hotter stuff than maybe she really is in her role because clearly Sophie's the one that actually has like way more magical prowess of these kids, that because Marnie just seems to like, oh, she has like the premonitions, but like she thinks she's way more hot stuff than she really is, and it's one of those things that like I almost was, again, since my recollection of the film was much more of a blur, I was kind of almost waiting for like the end reveal to be, oh, actually she isn't the witch, only Sophie's the witch, but she is just kind of, she can be like the ringleader and she can be like the advisor or something without having the actual magical powers. But obviously that's not how it really plays out. But I think that would have been like maybe a more interesting twist of things, to kind of take her down a bit of a peg, I guess. But again, in an hour and 30-minute movie, they're not looking for that level of like character death and those kinds of moments. So yeah, it is just kind of like beat to beat to beat. And yeah, my biggest thing coming back to this again as like really vague memories of it were, there would be like visuals that I would remember. I talked yesterday when we talked about it. Like I immediately, as soon as the ghost walks into the sweatbox, I immediately remembered, oh, scene's going to end and he's going to be a much skinnier guy coming out of the sweatbox. I remembered exactly how that joke was going to play out when all was said and done, and remembered it very vividly. Whereas like so much of the rest of the stuff, like when Luke gets introduced, I remembered that there was going to be some reveal that he was going to be like a creature more so, like at the end. I didn't remember that it was going to just be like a big nose prosthetic kind of on his face, and I guess like the troll ears or whatever. Like I thought he was going to be more full blown into like an ogre or something like that. So like even my mind had kind of like twisted some of those things, but like the basics of the framework of this movie were all there, just like bouncing around somewhere in the back of my brain. So it was interesting kind of seeing it and allowing myself to, as best I could, just kind of enjoy it for what it was, and what it was, again, trying to be there of the era. I'm almost certain I haven't actually watched any of the other Halloweentown movies, though, because I have no idea what happens with the characters next, kind of after this. Like, the fact that the second one was called, like, Calabar's Revenge was like, okay, well, I mean, good call, because, yeah, he's certainly one of the most fun things to watch, so absolutely try and bring him back, but I have no idea what that actually looks like. So maybe we'll save that for next year, when Halloween comes around. We'll do the other Halloweentown movies, except I guess not Return Halloweentown, because that one's bad apparently.
That's not a real movie. I don't even know what you're talking about. Calabar's Revenge, I would like I'm like low key would like be all right with the argument that like Calabar's Revenge is actually a better movie than the first Halloweentown. Like it's like darker and moodier for a Disney Channel movie kind of thing, but like it's really good.
And it doesn't have to do the legwork of setting everything up,
Yeah,
setting up this
yeah,
world
it
where
hits that ground running.
there were I didn't take like close notes of what they were, but there were definitely some characters there in Halloweentown that I was like, I feel like they're not really Halloween-towny characters. Like there was one particular
The pirate guy, yeah, that's the one for me.
No, I was not thinking pirate. I was thinking there's like a Confederate soldier or maybe a Union soldier, like somebody from the Civil War. There's basically like it's just a guy in a Civil War era uniform in the town hall at one of those points. I'm just like, how is that Halloweeny? Like how is that? Like that's not a creature. That's just a guy in a Civil War outfit.
Definitely for me, because he got like a big like zoom in on like he's like in the middle of the crowd at one point in time. There's just like a pirate and like a girl in like a dress next to him, like a cotillion ball dress, and I was like, what is their thing? These are just a pirate and like a girl in like a Southern Belle dress. Like this isn't a monster at all. Like they're just people. So like definitely in the background they're just like we needed extras and costumes. And like that guy, to his credit, got like himself in front of the camera for that scene where he was like smack in the middle. Yeah, some of that stuff is kind of funny. But on the whole, like I don't know, there are a lot of like favorite moments, even watching it again, right? Like we already kind of touched on, obviously for me, like the whole series of scenes of them getting everything is like literally when I think of like any Disney Channel movie, that scene for whatever reason, probably because I was like the perfect age, it's just like burnt into my head as like one of the most like iconic Disney Channel movie scenes of like them getting the various like ingredients for their stuff. I think anytime Benny's on screen is great. Even when he's like suddenly really bad and there's just like a random dog in Halloweentown. Why? Who's got a pet dog in Halloweentown? I don't know. They're wolf people, so it's kind of weird, but like, all right, yeah. And then like, honestly, like Debbie, I mean, like this is just a scene where it's like one of my favorite moments of the movie is just like Debbie Reynolds is great. Like, and not only is Debbie Reynolds great, but like as you would probably, I guess, assume or expect from someone of her caliber who's been in the industry for so long, she makes everyone around her better.
She was very much going back to like our Phantom of the Megaplex episode. She was very much the Ricky Rooney of this, who's just like absolutely like she is the legend that's on this set that's bringing the gravitas to it. That I think kind of had that like late run career of just working on stuff that maybe her grandkids would love to to see her in and stuff like that. Because a couple of her other credits that caught my eye were like she did a voice in Kim Possible and she was Lulu Pickles in the Rugrats. So
was she really?
Yeah. So she had kind of that end of like or later, certainly later part of her career, kind of resurgence in just doing some of these things that were much more centered around like kids and whatnot. So yeah. I think she just like Mickey Rooney has some real standout scenes in Phantom of the Megaplex, and like the kids are probably better for it working against him. You see the same kind of thing in the scenes there with Debbie Reynolds.
And I think in particular, like Aggie and Marnie's chemistry. I mean, like Kimberly J. Brown and Debbie Reynolds had, I mean, every one of the movies was basically 3 years apart. And so by the time they got to the third one, kind of that end of what is very clearly kind of the end of a trilogy at that point, I mean, like they've been together for 6 years at that point, and then like they've very much developed some sort of working relationship. And part of what I think is cool about the three Halloweentown movies, the third one is like a bit shakier, but like it's very much a passing of the torch of where like Debbie Reynolds is a huge role. I mean, like for the first half of the movie, she's arguably like the co-main character, if not the main character, and then it kind of shifts to Marnie in the back half. And then as like each movie goes on, like Debbie Reynolds kind of takes like a bit more of a step back, and Marnie kind of takes a bigger role. And I think it's kind of a fun to watch that evolution of those two characters' arcs. But yeah, she's great. I mean, her and Marnie are great, and like it's the thing for me of like, I think one of the most surprising things for me is getting to see good child actors versus bad child actors, and like how you draw that out of them. And like Kimberly J. Brown is like a super good actress. I mean, she's a good actress. Like she's done stuff and is still working. And I think now has like her own YouTube channel too, and she like does her own thing and like is successful. And like I bet you if you talk to her, she would say a big part of that came from getting to work on 3 films with Debbie Reynolds. She's 13 years old here and getting that advice then. But even Sophie, who's like has to be like a 5-year-old kid in this film, still gets great moments and still gets good laughs and still has her own like nice moments. Like all 3 of the kids, I think really land. Like even Dylan's recurring gag of like he's dreaming, like he's paranoid, he's accepted it. It's like whatever, like it's like not a real plane of existence. Like it's a funny recurring gag on his end as well. Like there are a lot of positives and a lot of favorites in this movie still watching it again, and not too many kind of unfair moments, and the unfair moments are mostly like really specific nitpicky things for the most part.
Yeah. One of the little trivia things I didn't pull in, but of note there is Kimberly J. Brown, who would have been 14 at the time of this movie, born in 1984, is only 16 years younger than her on-screen mother, Judith Hoag, who was born in June of 68. So it's another one of those kinds of like, oh yeah, well that's casting for you, I guess. Yeah, in terms of things I didn't like, it's not even necessarily I didn't like, but like you mentioned the broom scene earlier, and just
It's
kinda,
rough.
the rough chuckles of that like green screen stuff. Part of it for me was like they get up there and I'm like, what? Where are the other 2 kids? Like, did they just bail on the other 2 kids? What's going on? And then it eventually resolves and they oh, they were just taking it for a test drive or whatever. But on that same scene, like the fact that sales guy is just doing like an Elvis impersonation as a zombie ghoul kind of thing. It's just like what? Like that's a choice. That is certainly a choice. And I don't know if it was the actor's choice or if it was the director's choice, but it was a choice. And it's just one of those, like, I guess it's just shorthand of, hey, if you don't really have a character, go ahead and like go big with an impression, and you'll stand out and you'll be remembered on a podcast like this 20 years later. But yeah, it's just kind of one of those like weird things. But yeah, I guess some of the standouts for me would be Calabar, his whole introduction scene. He's absolutely like immediately likable, and then even if you can like piece together that he's probably going to be the bad guy, just kind of like given the framework of, well, we haven't really met anybody else in this town, so it's probably and the bad guy's probably going to be somebody we know, so it makes sense that it would be him. And then even his whole little backstory of like having this like missed connection romance with the mom, like maybe helping to fuel his like turn to the dark side or whatever, is an interesting little like layer that they didn't have to put in there, that I appreciate that they did. I appreciate that there was like an extra little level of history, and that he was like immediately excited to meet Gwen's kids and all that kind of stuff, even if he is resentful that she went off and married a human as a result. And then the little kind of collection of the items at the end that you kind of touched on, of getting the vampire's fang. I like the little reveal there that I'd forgotten about, that like the dentist is the tooth fairy, and it's just like this grotesque kind of like pigman thing or whatever that you don't think of when you think of tooth fairy. But yeah, it was a lot of little fun there. So it is a absolutely cheesy, but that's what it's trying to be, kind of like movie.
It's interesting too. Like I am excited for, like I guess next year now to watch the second one with you, where it's like a weird, the series is super weird because the first one is like it's cheesy and it's very much like lighthearted and kind of fun and just like introducing you to the world. And the third one is kind of like this like weird, it's a strange movie. Like it works, but like it's strange and like it's the weakest of the first 3. But the last one is like definitely like a little bit darker, and like it's like much more devoid of color and a lot more like gray. just in terms of like the actual visual palette because of like a thing that's happened to Halloweentown. And it's really cool. And like you get to like one of my favorite things I'll just like tease for the second thing is like the like B plot of the film of like where like all of the socks go that you lose and like where all the like the clothes you just like misplace end up is so good. And like it like explores that idea in a really funny way. That yeah, like I do feel like they really kind of hit their stride in that second one. And it's cool for me to like watch it again, knowing where they're going, like to see like the seeds that are planted and the characters that get brought back and what they do and how they kind of grow from there.
Cool. So, any other favorite moments or anything you want to highlight and celebrate?
I think in terms of a favorite moment, I really just enjoy how fanatical Gwen is about hating Christmas to just like an absurd degree, like a hilariously absurd degree. Like no, like for no real reason. Like if you don't want your kid to be witches, like there are like rational things you can do, and then there's like I'm gonna make like Halloween be like Voldemort's name in Harry Potter. Like it cannot be said in my household, and it's just like hilarious.
I was confused there because you had said it. You said how much she hates Christmas at first. And I was like, wait,
no, Halloween,
yeah,
Halloween,
yeah. That and that was one of those other things where like at the beginning of the film, up until like Calabar's entrance, like when it was just kind of the like Marnie versus Gwen kind of nature of things, I was like, okay, so clearly Marnie's going to end up being a witch or something, and the family comes from witches, and I was like, I don't know if I remember that from actually having seen this movie, or if I just remember, or if I'm just piecing that together because I understand storytelling 101. Like she is clearly so much in the camp against Halloween that there's clearly got to be some kind of tie-in from her family to Halloween. And then obviously that gets established when Aggie shows up, but. It wasn't until Calabar gets introduced where I was like, yeah, okay, now I definitely know I've seen this movie before. I agree. I think that like the like it's parenting 101 of like if you just push that hard against it, like the kid is just going to rebel against you, and that's like all they're going to want is Halloween. Oh, another thing that I got to shout out because that just reminded me, the amount of like just ridiculously close-ups in this movie, like it was jarring at points, and part of that started like right in that first little scene where Marnie's trying to like argue alongside her friends that basically immediately throw her under the bus or whatever, like why she should be able to go out with her friends on Halloween. Like it was just like the camera was just so close that it's like cutting off her face. It's not like, you know, it's not like a 3/4 shot or something where like the person is taking up 3/4 of the screen. It was like her head, the top of her head and the bottom of her face are cut off because we were that close. And there were just so many of those in this. I was like, why is the director or the DP just so close on these people's faces? What is it about like this? Is it that they didn't have like set dressing across the whole rest of the way, so they had to just like really hone in on that shot, or what? But it definitely like caught my attention that I didn't want to walk away from and not mention, I guess. I don't know if that stood out to you at all, but yeah, it's definitely something that like just really leapt out at me here watching this for the first time in however long.
I think
especially on my new big screen TV that is like 4K or whatever. It was like, oh yeah, this is a lot of Marnie's face just filling up 80% of my screen right now.
There are a few weird, I think, staging decisions and like camera, like. Even the broom scene wouldn't be as bad, but like it lasts so long. Like it goes on for like way longer than it needs to, because like they have their whole moment like we're flying, yeah, woohoo, and then they like have a conversation up there, and it's like, and like Debbie Reynolds has to like breathlessly say like the like central point of the movie, which is like if you're a witch, you just like wish it and then you get it, yay! And it's like this weird like what is happening right now in this weird poorly done CGI green screen background. It's like such a like everything about that broom scene is bad. And the length of it and how drawn out it is one. And then even like the very end of the movie, they're like as like they beat Calabar and they're walking to like the bus to go home. It does some weird like cuts back and forth to like the crowd and them that like don't, I think, sync up as well as it could have probably.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gives you again he makes another appearance there of like the pirate man. Whoever that extra was, shout out to him because he knew where that camera was in two different scenes and went for it and was like, I'm pushing my way to the front both times. But like we got like a like gratuitously long shot of like this crowd just like waving and cheering, and then it cuts back to like it was Dylan in particular just like waving at the crowd for so long, and it's like these are interesting shots. And also just like it was an interesting. The ending was kind of interesting, but like on the whole, it's a ton of fun and it's really good. And I had a blast watching it again. And it's so fast. Like you are flying through this movie. Like it is an hour and 20 minutes long, and it very much lives up to that quick paced nature of an hour and 20-minute long movie.
Yeah, one of the other things, because I just went to the IMDb to see if Pirate was listed there. He is not. Because like sometimes the actors will like go ahead and like edit the IMDb to put their stuff in as uncredited, but the uncredited roles in here are like Gargoyle / Drummer Boy, Vampire Mother, and Ice Cream Yeti Zombie / Delivery Guy. And Ice Cream Yeti Zombie Delivery Guy even went in and clearly wrote his own thing in like the trivia, because there's something basically to the effect of like, this actor went in to play such and such a role, but when they showed up at the costume fitting, like the costume didn't fit, so they had to swap this with this other actor. It's like, all right, neither of those people were actually like people in this movie. But seeing it did remind me of another one of the people where it's just like, how is this a monster? And that is the secretary, who's just a pincushion. Like that's not a horror creature or anything like that I would think of associated with Halloween. So like, what? Weird. I don't know. Just some weird stuff there.
Yeah.
But it did make me pull in, or want to give a shout out to this one last actor in here, because I recognize him from other things. He's credited in here as Hip Sales Creature, and the actor is Kenneth Choi, who was one of the Howling Commandos in Captain America, and then later comes back into the MCU as Peter's principal in Spider-Man: Homecoming, and makes a reference, or there's a visual reference back to his like grandfather, who was a Howling Commando in his office. So shout out to Kenneth Choi, for who's another one of those character actors, and this would have been probably very early in his career, playing Hip Sales Creature in this film. So yeah. Yeah, just some real weird stuff in there. But yeah, Halloweentown. I get the love and the the deep appreciation for Halloweentown here. So what do you want to give it as a grade? Report card. Grade it from A+ to F. Where do you want to throw this one?
I think like in terms of like where I'm grading it on the spectrum of being a television movie. I think an A-. Like it. I think for a movie that is 22 years old, it is a ton of fun still. Like it is just really charming and it's fun, and I think it totally embraces that. Like there are quirky parts of it, there are weird moments, but like they kind of all work in the context of like what this movie is. And so yeah, like I think an A-. Like Kimberly J. Brown is great as Marnie. Debbie Reynolds is always great. Grin is a ton of fun, and then Calabar is great and just chews up his scenes. Like his like, even especially like after he like takes off his mask and it's just like in this full giant like black ribs at the end. Like he's just like owning it and having so much fun. I feel like in those scenes, and so yeah, I would say an A-. In terms of like the Disney Channel movies I've graded on this podcast with you, I would put it right alongside there with Brink, which was shockingly still a ton of fun.
Yeah, that one certainly I think holds up the best of any of them that I've seen so far. I I'm gonna give it a little bit lower. I'm gonna give it a solid B.
That's fair.
But I think that's part of that is probably fueled by I don't have that like nostalgic love for it, and this very much is like the epitome of B movie kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
one last little point I wanted to mention, since you mentioned Calabar there at the end, there like a couple things with that final scene that like stood out to me. One, I think it was a very giant leap in logic that like, oh, we have to install this in the big pumpkin in the center of town because, traditions in the human realm mirror, traditions on this side of things. It was like, how, like, that's a little bit of a stretch that, like, that's where you went and that was right. I feel like that could have been a little bit better set up in the film. But then, just with how Calabar is like is kind of like recruiting the townspeople, and just like, yeah, they're all like super eager to just like go right along with him, and like there's no opposition. These people are all fed up with the human realm.
They're all Trumpers,
and
man.
Really,
yeah.
They really want to just jump right on his messaging there, because like you see like all those like smiling, nodding faces, which is just extras being like told to just like, yeah, just smile and nod alongside with whatever he's saying, and yeah, so that definitely like spoke to me as well, or jumped out at me. So yeah, I give it a solid B, which I part of me wants to go back at some point and just kind of like figure out what I've given everything, or figure out what we and like the other guests, hosts and everything have given every one of the things, and I just haven't done that. But I think I gave last week Frankenweenie like a C, just because it's not like the Tim Burton aesthetic has never really been my cup of tea. So this I enjoyed sitting down with this more than I enjoyed Frankenweenie, at least. A little bit of extra credit, other suggestions if you like this one. Of course, you've got all the other Halloweentown movies in there. What like weirdly jumped out at me is that like the order of things, they threw out Halloweentown High there first as the first one, and then Halloweentown 2, Calabar's Revenge.
It's maybe more tonally similar to the first one. That might be why.
Yeah, it's some of those things. Like, I have no idea how Disney Plus's algorithm works.
Yeah,
and I don't think they do either sometimes. But Return to Halloweentown is the third one there, and then you have basically just a ton of other Disney Channel original movies that are this. Twitches, which has come up a number of times in these. Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire, which is another one we've done an episode on. The Scream Team, Can of Worms, and then Phantom of the Megaplex, which we've also, again, as mentioned earlier, done an episode on that. So
I think I just like the Halloween episodes of Disney Channel movies. Apparently,
you clearly do. They clearly like ring a bell for you. And honestly, like, I prefer those to the superhero one that we did, which its name escapes me. And Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off.
I love how much you hate Eddie's $1 Million. It's the best. It's the best.
Like, because that was like the first one Frank threw out there, and it was the first one in this on this show, is the first Disney Channel original movie we watched, and it was one that I'd definitely never seen before. So it was definitely like, oh yeah, so this is what that era of Disney Channel original movies looked like that I'm not looking at with rose-tinted glasses. And so yeah, I look at that, I'm just like, there are just so many terrible montages in that, and one of the crucial things is the kid learning how to, and he never actually learns how to crack a freaking egg one-handed. And it's just like, why is that such a plot point in this movie? So yeah, Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off. Go back to episode 3 of that D Plus show if you want to enjoy our thoughts on that. Extracurriculars, you watching anything else on Disney Plus these days?
No, but Mandalorian season 2 starts on Halloween, so maybe
it does
soon.
Indeed. It comes Friday, so it's on the 30th, I think. And yeah, it's we still need to. I think I want to try and get everybody together, or at least as many of us as we can, to sit down and do like a Mandalorian season 1
recap.
Recap / episode of that D Plus show. So because I think I don't know if you ever finished watching it actually, but like I'm definitely going to sit down and rewatch season 1 in the lead up to Mandalorian season 2 this week. So maybe that'll be a future episode here, as we can dive into the first season of The Mandalorian. So yeah, that's where I'm at too. As I haven't really been watching anything else, but I'm definitely going to tune into Mandalorian season 2 when that comes out later this week, or actually, I guess today if you're listening to this the day it goes live, but later this week as of recording. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, Logan, for joining me to talk about Halloweentown here and your affinity for it. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Logan?
I will give a shout out to this week's episode of That News You Care About that me and Trevor recorded. I think it is a really good episode, and I think we had one of my favorite conversations yet on that show, on AOC, the Twitch streaming, and just the nature of politics in America right now.
Yeah. I will second that. You can follow me on Twitter at Trevor J. Starkey, and I echo that because we recorded that literally right before we recorded this episode. But it's a couple days old as of the time of posting here and publishing. But yeah, we basically since last week when we were recording That News You Care About, AOC basically went live and did her Twitch stream while we were recording that. It's a little delayed, but we basically use that as just kind of like a very loose way into talking about like politics in America and the power of seeing, a politician using a medium that we love of video games to try and get out the vote and try and engage and activate and advocate to an audience that may often be overlooked. And yeah, we just kind of dive down a whole bunch of different rabbit holes in the political conversation as a result of that. So check out that episode. I thought it was a very good conversation. You can follow all of the latest from That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com. If you liked what you heard, as always, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends and all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us by helping us out on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.